without further ado, Charles Berg.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. And before I get started, I just want to thank everyone at Sloss Fest, or Sloss Tech, excuse me, for hosting this wonderful conference. I also want to say this is a huge stage, a beautiful auditorium, and when I speak, I tend to wander constantly. So you've given me like your worst nightmare. You're going to see me go from back to forth, back to forth. All right. So, as Gordy said, see if this works. Yeah. My name is Charles Berg. I'm a lead designer for the Google Home products. And today I'm going to talk a lot about designing for humans. Basically what I'm going to, there we go. Basically what I'm going to talk about is that over the last 10 years or so, I believe app developers and designers have kind of lost exactly what human context means. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about 20th century designers and how this is different than what our history has. I'm going to basically talk about that current state of affairs. Then I'm going to bring it personal and talk about my experience both at Skype before I worked at Google and how I've learned how to change my mindset to make sure that the human is in all of my designs. And then finally, I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to talk about how my team makes sure that we are designing context first instead of technology first. Whoa, there should be a blank slide there. Oh, taken out. I'm going to leave this slide up. So smart speakers have opened up, there we go. Smart speakers have opened up a new way of interaction. Siri started it off 6 years ago or so. Amazon made it big about 3 years ago. And just a couple years ago, Google Home and the Google Assistant have brought choice to the marketplace. But as great as these smart speakers are, there are only a few experiences that people reliably use. So I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hand. It's hard to see, there we go. Raise your hand if you have one of these smart speakers at home. Amazon, Alexa thing, Google Home, maybe a HomePod. All right. Now, I would like you who have speakers to turn to your neighbors who don't have speakers and spend about 30 seconds just talking about what you use that speaker for. So just go ahead, just turn to your neighbor and just say, what do I use the speaker for? That's it. Okay. Bring it back to me. Bring it back to me. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to do some hand raising. I just learned if I sit down, I don't get this glare in my, perfect. Now we're going to do some hand raising. We're going to talk about what we use our speakers for. So everyone who has a smart speaker, or those who didn't, if you heard the smart speaker people talk about using their speaker for communication, be it text messaging or phone calls or broadcast, raise your hand right now. All right, everyone look around, good. Now, if you smart speaker people use your smart speaker, or you who don't have it, heard people say that they would use it, or they do use it for turning on the lights or other Internet of Things stuff. Okay, great. And now, smart speaker people, who uses it for alarms and timers? That's pretty much a good majority. Oh, geez. All right. And then finally, who uses the smart speaker for music? That's everybody. And that's pretty much what we see as well. And so the question is, how do you create experiences for these smart speakers that people can reliably use over and over again? Now, we're working very hard at Google to make sure that smart speakers are a regular and integrated part of everyday life. But there are some issues. And the one issue that I would like to talk about today is basically that since the smartphone revolution, it's been 10 years now, can you believe it? Since the smartphone revolution, that has basically captured the imagination of the world. And basically what that has done is taken a lot of focus onto smartphones and taken the human, someone very important, out of the equation. So app developers and designers have started to focus not about humans or the context, but how you can get that person to just keep going down on the, looking at the app or at the phone themselves. And this mentality is a real radical shift for designers. If you go back to 20th century designers like Charles and Ray Eames or Frank Lloyd Wright, if you listen to them talk in interviews, they talk about humans and their context like all the time. In fact, I would like to show you a brief video. It's only a couple of minutes. It's an interview with Charles Eames, who made this chair, designer, in 1972. A French museum was asking him about what design was. And it's a fascinating interview because the French interviewer is trying to nail down what is design, what is it, into the most narrow terms possible. But Charles Eames is not going to have any of that, and he keeps bringing the idea of design as something that has context, that is connected to humans, connected to all of us. And it's a real fascinating exchange. The other fascinating part of the exchange is just listening to Charles Eames talk. This guy is direct and to the point. So let me play that for you.
What is your definition of design, Monsieur Eames?
One could describe design as a plan for arranging elements to accomplish a particular purpose.
Is design an expression of art?
I would rather say it's an expression of purpose. It may, if it is good enough, later be judged as art.
Is design a craft for industrial purposes?
No, but design may be a solution to some industrial problems.
What are the boundaries of design?
What are the boundaries of problems?
Is design a discipline that concerns itself with only one part of the environment?
No.
Is it a method of general expression?
No, it is a method of action.
Is design a creation of an individual?
No, because to be realistic, one must always recognize the influence of those that have gone before.
Is design a creation of a group?
Very often.
Is there a design ethic?
There are always design constraints, and these often imply an ethic.
Does design imply the idea of products that are necessarily useful?
Yes, even though the use might be very subtle.
Is it able to cooperate in the creation of works reserved solely for pleasure?
Who would say that pleasure is not useful?
Ought form to derive from the analysis of function?
The great risk here is that the analysis may be incomplete.
Can the computer substitute for the designer?
Probably, in some special cases, but usually the computer is an aid to the designer.
So, fascinating stuff. It is just super interesting to listen to that person ask about what exactly is design. Just try and nail it down. Is it for industrial purposes? And always the answer, Charles Eames, he just gives the variation of the same answer over and over and over again. Yes, of course, it's part of this. It's part of the environment. It's part of humans. It's part of context. One answer that I thought was super cool, that was pretty awesome, was the one where he talks about you have to make sure that you know what has happened before you, the designers and the designs and the solutions that have come before you. Just making sure that the human is linked into the equation of design so strongly. And I really enjoy this, Charles Eames and other 20th century designers' great awareness of context within design. But unfortunately, I believe, since the smartphone revolution, we designers and app developers have given very little attention to context. In fact, I believe the opposite. With concepts such as the toothbrush habit, we have been busy creating experiences and applications that take people out of their context. Just think about notifications, how that is just simply an excuse for a human to get out of their environment and back down into the phone. And if we really want to have users or people integrate new technologies into their lives, we need to change that idea around. We need to stop thinking about the technology and start thinking about the human. But this is the current state of affairs that we're in. When I worked at Skype before Google, my team was tasked with creating a group video calling experience for the mobile phones. Skype had created group video calling for computers, but they really hadn't nailed the mobile phone just at that time. And at the time that I was working at Skype, we were in an agile environment, which simply means that we did software development on a 2-week cycle with rapid feedback and an iterative process. And it was awesome. I even hurried up the iterative process, and I had my designers designing new designs every week, and researchers going out to coffee shops or wherever and asking users about those designs, and we would observe and we'd interview, and everybody in the project team was involved. The product managers and the software engineers all observed and tried to see what the new design would bring to the table. But even in this awesome agile environment, we didn't give much thought to the human at all. Instead, a lot of our questions revolved around things like, how many heads could fit on a mobile phone screen? Or what does the overflow menu look like? Or when will it come up? All of those issues are extremely important, but they don't really pay attention to what the human is trying to do, where they have come from, what they are trying to achieve, and perhaps what they want to do afterwards. There was very little consideration of the human in time and space. And really, why would we consider that? We rightfully knew that the smartphone was on the person's body, and so that they could make a video call anytime, if they were inside, if they were outside, if they were on the beach or on the moon. It really didn't matter to us. But I argue that that is actually an app-first, human-second mindset. I keep pulling this out here. Smart speakers, unlike smartphones, share one important characteristic. They are fixed in a place. People feel like when they talk to it, they have to go to it, or they have to at least direct their voices to it. When people buy these smart speakers, or they get it as a gift, they spend a lot of time thinking about where in the house it will go. And the reasons about where they put their smart speaker are as varied as they are common sense. We have asked, and some people say, well, I'm very active in the kitchen, so I put it there. Or I ask it questions while I'm watching TV, so it's on an end table. Or it's the best alarm clock I ever had. And with that placement in the home comes an inference of the type of use that people will use. And that essentially is the context that we need to know to make something for the speaker. I stumbled into this contextual human mindset when I started work at Google. I was hired right after the original Google Home launched, and the business team was moving at an extremely rapid pace to fill out functionality to make sure that these smart speakers were working as best as they could. And so it was a very rapid, a very exciting time. And I was one of the early designers on the experiences. And one of the first experiences that I was tasked to design was making, how to design making phone calls on the Google Home. Now, a side note. When I was designing for phone calls for the Google Home, I was a solo designer, but now I lead a small team of smart, awesome, good-looking designers. And when I bring someone onto that team, I always tell that person that they were hired for a number of great reasons, and they need to speak up, ask questions, speak up, and give their opinions right away, very quickly, so that we can leverage and take advantage of the great things that they are bringing to the team. But honestly, if I would have given that advice to myself when I was designing phone calls, that would have been bad advice, because between you all and me, I wasn't too excited about designing phone calls. It's not that there weren't design challenges. There were many design challenges. It was very interesting, very, very hard to work through those things. So that was cool. It's just that it was more emotional, really, is what it was. I just wasn't excited about changing this amazing piece of technology into a feature set that had a lot more in common with a wall phone. But I didn't have any reason to speak up. I didn't have any data to say, let's move in a different direction. I was new. And so I kept my head down and I worked. And once I figured out the context for what people would use this calling on smartphones for, it became clear to me that this was a really good direction. So let me tell you that story. From what I wanted to bring from my previous job before Google, which was Skype, was that agile mindset. But hardware companies, they are very difficult things to run, because hardware has more to do with it than just sitting down, coding, and releasing it, which is complex enough, don't get me wrong. But when you add hardware into the mix, you start thinking about supply chains, assembly, shipping, packaging, retail space, for example. And so hardware companies tend to look as far into the future as they possibly can so that they can nail down these things. And an agile mindset of week by week or every other week, that's not hardware companies' forte. And Google hardware was no exception to that. But I found some allies within the organization, and I took my wins where I could. And one of the wins that I took early was requesting user research before we even had a design. Before we even knew what kind of direction calling would go in, I wanted some user research done. But because there was no design to research, there was no design to validate, I had to help the user researcher figure out what kind of questions they would ask. And so I started creating context by way of creating storyboards. Storyboards, all it is a comic strip. And storyboards is something that I used to do as a young designer a ton. But later on in my career, I wasn't doing it anymore. It had fallen out of favor. And the simple reason is because when you're designing for smartphone apps or when you're designing for a smartphone, no one needs stick figures running around, looking at their smartphone, tapping it, or anything like that. They want the screens themselves. So I hadn't storyboarded in a while. But it was a valuable tool to understand concept, because when I shared these storyboards, this is a sample one, to the researcher, she started creating a number of very direct questions to ask users, to ask basically strangers. Questions such as, when do you call someone instead of texting them? How often do you call a single person? What types of businesses do you call? These are extremely basic questions, but the one thing they all had in common, get to walk. So thrilling to walk back. The one thing that they had in common was that they paid attention to the user context. And this early conceptual research, just simply questions, paid dividends. Before the research was done, the team was focused on trying to leverage the power of Google to make sure that when you said call a business, call Alabama Power, that it would nail it right away, boom. It'd be fast and easy. And so we were focused on a lot of business cases, things such as disambiguation, like if you have 3 Walgreens in the same area, you know, and you say call Walgreens, like which one? Do we have to ask the user, which one do you want? Or can we infer or assume? Those were kind of the issues that we were looking at. But when we got the user research back, we changed directions almost immediately, because what a lot of the users said was that they would use phone calls not necessarily to call businesses that often, but to call people close to them, their friends, their family, their relatives, and they would use it to maybe make short 2 or 3 minute conversations, mostly to coordinate or to just check in. And doing this hands-free somehow was very attractive to them. Just realized I was next to a globe. It's like that thing in Star Wars. It's just going to come out. So this very simple research, I feel more secure over here all of a sudden. This very early research changed our direction dramatically. We still focused on businesses, don't get me wrong. If you say call Walgreens, if you have a Google Home, go home and say call Walgreens, and you'll get the answer to the question about if there's more than one Walgreens around. But we renewed a focus on doing anything we possibly could to make sure that the Google Home knew your contacts, people around you, so that when you said call mom, it called your mom and not your roommate's mom or just some random mom. And all of this, all of this insight, all of this direction just came from simply asking people what they would do before they got to Google Home. So, since then, I've grown a team, and I try and encourage the team to look at design challenges context first. And the way that we do this is that we start with research, as you might imagine. But it might surprise you to know that this is, oh, there we go. We start usually with secondary research. We're big fans of Google, go figure, and we tend to Google a lot of articles, blogs, whatever we can find about whatever we're trying to solve. And so we spend a lot of time doing that, and then we augment, oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, a lot of the secondary research, not only is it articles and blogs, but there's a lot of surveys out there that are free to the public, like Pew Trusts have a lot of internet surveys and just how people use technology, and you can look them up right now. There are governmental surveys too. There's a census every year on how many landlines are used in the United States and what the percentage is, just kind of a macro sort of study. So we look at a lot of studies, and also some other secondary research we look at a lot are, we look at major home builders like the Toll Brothers and D.R. Horton. These are home builders in the United States, and the reason that we look at their press releases a lot. And the reason is because we want to know how houses are being built and what kind of rooms are in them and what the expectation of those rooms are. Because we're trying to find as much context as we possibly can about usage, and that's a real good source. And so then we supplement our secondary research with old research from our company. If you guys, I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, but I'm sure that's not everybody. And if you are somebody who works at a medium size or large corporation, there is research going on all the time. And it's just human nature that when people research a topic, once they get the answer to that topic or the project moves on, they usually archive that research, which is a real shame because a lot of research has secondary information in it that may have not been the solution to the original problem, but you can go back and farm and learn about people. So say, for example, a company's like, well, we have something that's red or it's blue. Let's do a survey and find out. Let's do some research, find out who likes red, who likes blue. You know, you get the information back and everybody loves blue, and so you're like, okay, it's blue, and then you archive that research. That usually at that moment, it's just kind of human nature to move on, right? But there may have been a lot of information about colors that's in there that just didn't really answer the central question. Perhaps there was a lot of information about how people choose things. You know, maybe they're confused by a lot of choices, or maybe there's information about color blindness, or just super interesting information that wasn't right for that project, but can be reused. And so we tend to supplement our secondary research with old research. And then, after we do that, we go out and interview and observe people. Again, at this point, we don't have a design to whatever we're trying to solve. We're just trying to figure out how people make do in the world right now, trying to bring in that human context. Most of our interviews at the early stages are with our friends, our family, people we know, but we always bring in, at some point, strangers. Either we go find them in coffee shops, or we go pay them to come into our building, whatever the case may be. And the reason that we always need strangers at the interview and observe sort of phase is just simply to check our bias. If you're always asking your friends or your family what's cool or what do they do about this kind of stuff, then most likely what you are going to design, the experience you are going to design, is going to be great for your friends and family, but not so great for anyone else. So after we do the secondary research, we farm the research, we look at Google, we do some interview and observation, then the next thing that we do is we pull that all together and we have a meeting, and it's what I call a research pitch meeting, where we pitch each other in the team the insights that we found from all of this. And so, and when I mean everybody, or when I mean the group, I would like to expand on that. At this stage of the game, when you're trying to develop something, it's good to have everybody involved. UX designers, UX researchers, of course, are great to have, but business people, product managers, software engineers, marketing, anybody can research. Anybody can ask questions. Anybody can observe. And the more people you get at this stage of the game, the more diverse your opinions are, the more diverse your solutions will ultimately be. And so we always have a big team at that point, relatively big. Like, you know, fits in an SUV big, like 5 people or 6 people kind of big. Not huge, but relatively big. And we pitch each other those insights. And after we pitch those insights, the next thing we do is designate someone that I'm going to call the lead designer. And the lead designer is responsible for 3 things. They're responsible for creating themes out of the research that you just did. They're responsible for brainstorming based on the themes, and they're leading the brainstorming. And then they're responsible for creating user journey maps from the brainstorming and from the themes. So what are themes? Themes are simply a summary of the research, summary of the insights that you did. Whatever you're trying to make may have a lot of themes, or it may have just a few themes. It doesn't really matter. It depends on what you're trying to do. But what we do is, and my team, is we have a very strict format to our themes. I'm going to talk about them right now. So just to give you a little context, this is a sample theme thing. I just made this up in my mind. So my design goal, or my design problem, was stock trading. Like, individual stock traders, sometimes they don't really know what to do. And so I pulled together my imaginary software team and my imaginary PMs and my imaginary designers, and we did some imaginary research, and then we did the imaginary pitch, and then out of that imaginary pitch, we came up with some insights, 3 of them to be specific. I'm not going to read them all to you because I just made them up, but I am going to read you the first one because I want to talk to you about the format here. So basically, what we do for our themes is the first line is always just the headline. So in this case, we found from our insights that individual stock traders sometimes feel alone. They don't feel like they're part of the community, and they also don't know sometimes the context in which they're trading. Like if their stock goes up or down, is that a good or bad? Who knows? Was it a good day on the market? Who knows? So those were the things that we were trying to solve. And so we knocked that down into 3 themes: education, information, and connection. And education, what we do on our team is we just have a headline: how to trade stocks, very simple. The next couple lines are just a couple sentences that explain what the headline means. So in this case, it says, stocks are daunting to the novice. Oh, it's so big. They get tripped up. I'm going to fall backwards. They get tripped up on the symbols, the meaning and the movement of the market, and how bonds affect anything at all. So that's just a little filler, a little color to understand what the theme is. But then, and this is important, what you see in purple is what we call the HMW, the how might we. And basically what it is it takes that insight and it poses it as a question, how might we help? So in this case, how might we help educate the beginning investor without overwhelming him or her? And so the lead designer is responsible for taking that research and creating themes out of them after the pitch session. But then what that designer does is usually give the themes back to the team at least a day, hopefully at least a day, sometimes hours, but before the next step, which is brainstorming. And the reason is because those how might we's are going to be your tent pole for brainstorming. So brainstorming. There are a million ways to brainstorm, but recent research has shown that the most effective brainstorming is brainstorming in which people come up with the ideas on their own and then share to a group. Instead of like what you see on TV or something where everybody's like just yelling out, oh yeah, it should be green, no, make it blue, you know. That isn't as productive as if you get people into a room and you give them a challenge to ideate on a certain idea or a certain theme, and then after they've done that, they share. And so because of that, my team uses two types of brainstorming methodology. So I'll explain them briefly. Number one is called the 8x8. Used to be called the 6x6, but one of my team members made it 8x8. I don't know why. Inflation. But anyway, what you do is you take a normal piece of paper, completely blank on both sides, you fold it in half, you fold it in half again. Then, this is important, you fold it down the long line. When you unfold the piece of paper, it will have 8 squares. The challenge is for everybody who has this 8-square piece of paper to put an idea in each one of those squares. You don't have to limit yourself to 8, you can do more than 8, but what we usually do is we say you have 15 minutes to do this in. So everybody's just silently working, 15 minutes, they're just drawing or sketching out whatever ideas they have. After that, and this is important, we go around one by one and we explain each idea one by one. And so the reason we do that is, number one, to make sure everybody in the room has a voice, but also, secondly, we want to make sure that everyone hears everyone else's ideas so they can leverage it, because this only works if you do another round of 8x8. So you write stuff down, you listen to people, you show your ideas, and then you do another round. And that's when your brain starts leveraging the good ideas that you've heard, and you come up with, hopefully, a bunch of great ideas. That's one way. The other way is more active. It's way more exciting and crazy, which is basically this one. I have this one designer on my team that loves this one. And basically, it's you put the themes on a wall in the room, boom, 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 just the names of them, whatever. So in the case of this one, it'd be like education, information, community, boom, boom, boom. You give everybody in the room Post-it notes and a Sharpie, and you say, okay, write down an idea on your Post-it note. When you're done, the second you're done, jump up from your chair, run over to the wall, post it on the wall in the right area, and then yell it out to the team. My idea is to make sure that Apple stock is always being said, or something. And then you go and you sit down and you do another. And so it's this constant chaotic kind of atmosphere of people writing and yelling and running around. But it really does the same thing as 8x8, which is people have time to themselves, might be a little chaotic, but time to themselves to make the idea up, but they also hear everyone else's ideas, and if they hear a good idea, they can leverage it and they can build on it. And that's the whole idea behind brainstorming. So either of those work. There are others that do that, but just try and keep in mind, give people time to do stuff and then talk about it. After brainstorming, the lead designer goes away one more time, and they come back with the user journey map. And the user journey map is the most exciting part of the whole thing, because this is where context and ideas and everything comes together. If you Google user journey map, you will find a number of formats. But my team really prefers a simple one. And I'm going to walk over here for no good reason to explain it. So basically, we have 3 rows, At the top is, we call it phases. That's the context. That's the context of humans from what you did, when you did all the research before and you were like, what is the context? What are people bringing or what are they trying to do? That's your phases. The next thing is activities. Those are the ideas that you brainstormed. Awesome. Lined up to phases. And then finally, this is the new part, made up, you have experience goals at the bottom, where whatever you're making should have multi-goals depending on what phase, what context it's in. So in this case, and the fun part about user journey maps is you don't have to limit yourself to the experience itself. You can expand the context and think about what happens before and what happens after as well, because that might affect what you're trying to do. So in the case of my made-up user journey, the stock quote, we have the phases, the context. In my made-up world, there are many stock quote applications, and you have to choose one to use it on Google Home or on Alexa. And so you need to research them, right? So actually, my phases start before the stock quote, application, skill, experience, whatever you want to call it, in the consider phase, where maybe we need to write blog posts or make some sort of comparison so that, you see the experience goal at the bottom, we aid the user's decision-making, hopefully choosing our app over someone else's. Once they've done that, then they move into the setup phase, where you can see the actions are stuff like asking knowledge questions, like, are you experienced, or an experienced trader, and then also asking what stocks you want to follow. And what that is doing is preparing someone for use. And then finally, on the day one, or probably immediately after setup, you can see that the actions are stuff like fire general market quotes and confirm if it's okay. The reason I thought about that was because the whole point of our app is to educate the user, to educate how to trade stocks, right? And so I thought, even if they don't express to this point interest in the general market, the Dow Jones average, NASDAQ, or whatever, maybe we should give it to them anyway, and then ask them if it's okay. And that's the whole point right there. Initial education. And so it goes on and on. And this is where the magic happens, because you can look at this and you can say to yourself, you know, I don't know, I don't think we have the right phases, or I'm not sure we have any good activities there, or, you know, we're not really sure what the experience goals are. And so you can go back in time, not literally back in time, but you can go back to the old things. You can brainstorm some more. You can interview and observe some more. Or if you look at it and you say, yeah, this is good, I think we should build this, you can start breaking it down and start designing it and building it. So the directions are essentially limitless at this point, but there are two things we do at this stage. If this is a successful journey map, the first thing that we do is we have a heart-to-heart with the business, the product manager, maybe marketing, or whoever is pulling the purse strings, and we talk about what parts of our experience are the most impactful. And the reason for that is just very practical. It's just like, well, if you have to build something first, you probably want to build the most impactful thing first. The second thing that we always do at this time is that we always put this on the wall. And the reason is it gives the team context. Just like we're trying to give users context, it gives the team context to make sure we know where things are going, how things have been, and what we have done. Then, for design, on smart speakers, this is where it gets extremely interesting. As you have probably experienced for the last 45 minutes, when people are talking to you, it takes up time. You know, information takes up time. There's no way to skim me when I'm talking, you know, or there's no way to slow me down. This is the time it takes. And in smart speakers, that is also very true. If you have a website or something and you have all this information on it, people can skim it, they can use the search function, they can do shortcuts. But there's very few shortcuts when something is speaking at you. And if you're creating an experience for smart speakers, the last thing that you want is a smart speaker droning on and on while the user is trying to move on, you know, trying to do something else. And so I would like to direct you to a couple tools that help create dialogues. And one of those tools is, if you go to Actions on Google, just Google it, Actions on Google. It's a Google-made site. There is a dialogue style guide. And it's done by linguists, And it's awesome. They're really smart. And they kind of tell you how to put the dialogue together or not. But even if you do that, and even if you do follow the quote-unquote style guide rules, our team actually does a lot of variations on that as well. We experiment. And the reason for that is simply because smart speakers are really new in the world. And so I'm not sure that a single style guide has all the answers. So we tend to do a number of different variations on a dialogue to make sure that we have them right. Which leads me to my next thing, which is that when we design dialogues, we want to let them soak. We want to experiment with them. We want to bring them to friends, family, maybe users, whatever. So we record a number of variations. How do we record? There's a very simple way to record. If you just use a smartphone, you can use the recorder on any smartphone. You can just record yourself. It's very fake, but it works very well. You can understand the length of dialogues. That's one way. Secondly, back to Actions on Google, if you go to that website, there's a tool that allows you to record your dialogue in the Google Voice, the Google Home voice. So that's nice, in case you're sick of your own voice. But the third most important tool that we use a lot is something also on Actions on Google, which is called Dialogflow. And what Dialogflow allows you to do is it allows you to create a skeleton dialogue, but then it uses the artificial intelligence that powers the Google Assistant to find all the variations for you, all the variations, so you don't have to say, oh, wait for yes or yeah or uh-huh. You know, it already has that stuff built into it. And if you use Dialogflow, you can play it back. You can interact with it on your computer or on your Google Home on your personal network. It's easy just to do it there. So you can just play around with it a lot. And that's really key to let it soak and try a number of different variations for whatever you're trying to do on smart speakers. And so that finally brings me to the last point, which is that, yeah, we go back and we user test again and again and again. This is a picture. However, when we user test, we want to make sure that context is key. We want to make sure that even the users, people that we may pay to bring in to just test or whatever, that they are thinking the home, because that's our context, right? And so this is a picture of a usability lab in my building. If you have usability labs or you've been to usability labs in your company, they're cool places, super cool. But they are ultimately office rooms in an office, maybe bigger rooms, but they're still office space. And that's not the context that we work in. We work in homes. And so for this one, we were trying to figure out some multi-room solution for something or another. And so I don't even know where we got those dividers, but we just dragged them in so that we could create a wall and 2 rooms. Now I know it doesn't look like a home, but for every user that came in to give their opinions about what we were trying to test, it got them in the mindset. It gave them that sort of home context. Oh, this is multiple rooms. And that's really the important thing here. So here's your guide to a successful approach. Research the home. Ask your friends, use Google, do research. Secondly, create themes from those research, simple summaries of that research. Then brainstorm. Please remember, come up with the ideas alone and then share with the group. Create user journey maps. Create them again until you've got a good one. Break it down, and then with your dialogues, experiment all the time. Do man behind the curtain, do fake recordings, do Dialogflow, whatever it takes. And then the last rule is have fun. This is a new frontier, and I'm just super excited to see what you and anyone else is going to create for these smart speakers to create that lasting, reliable, next big experience. Thank you.
Oh. Man.
Thank you.
All right, let's ask some questions here. Great job, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, quick round of true and false,
Sure.
if you would.
Yeah.
One, is it true that you once lived in Hungary?
It is true, yes.
True?
Yeah.
True or false that you were once a school teacher?
Yes, in Hungary and also in America.
Wow, all right.
Yeah.
True or false, we should get an apartment together.
Well, if it's in the beautiful city of Birmingham, I mean, why not?
Right. True or false, your 9-year-old son can beat you in chess.
He can, yes. Just
outrageous.
this year. It took a while. When he was 8, I was like, if I wasn't paying attention, he would beat me, right? But now at 9, he just beats me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions for you, and I wish I hadn't talked to you before this because I've probably some of them I'm going to repeat myself. But it's such a fascinating subject, the concept of home automation, and I feel like I have major schizophrenia about it. So I have every ecosystem there is: the Google one, the Apple one, the Amazon one, and I'm really confused. I use the Amazon one for shopping, and then the Google one for good questions, and the Apple one for my music. And then I feel like if I commit to one of those, I'm going to be stuck in it forever.
Yeah.
What is it like for you guys when you consider the user experience and the competition that there is for that space?
So this is extremely early days, and so thinking about things that have become very mature on the web or on the internet or even in smartphones, like the portability of data and all those kind of things, are issues that we're interested in, but we haven't addressed them necessarily yet. Just simply, and I'm being very, very truthful here, we're just super excited to do the next thing, and try and get the next functionality out. But I as well as my company, we acknowledge that there's ultimately down the road going to be a little bit of an issue here if someone wants to start on Amazon and move to Google or vice versa or whatever the case may be. And Google works really hard to make sure that you can you're in control of your own data on the web or on apps. You can download it, and you can delete yourself from Google relatively easily. But I acknowledge we still need to do that for the Google Home a little bit better.
Sure.
So, okay. But that's coming. I can't say when, but it will.
Right. Well, there's a lot of smart products out there, and it's a little confusing to the end user, well, at least to me, perhaps more so than other people, but I don't know if they're going to automatically be compatible with, this ecosystem or that ecosystem, and I presume they're not, and so I feel like it's an obstacle to commit to products because I'm not sure,
So right now, you're right, they're not compatible with each other, but right now, Amazon and Google are quickly making sure that every Internet of Thing out there is compatible with both. I mean, we're not doing that collectively. We're just obviously it's kind of like a competition. Right. And so I sit on I have a Friday meeting where I'm a launch gator, not just me, but this team of people, and we just look at what's being developed around the company and what's going out on Google Home, and we give it a high sign or a no or whatever. Right. It's a great meeting. Anyway, but the beginning of that meeting is home automation. Like, what partners are we launching this week? And there's usually, no joke, at least 10. I mean, there's always, every week, we're just launching more and more partners. And I know our competition is as well. So at the very least, if you buy yourself a Hue light bulbs or anything that is supposed to work with Smart Assistant, it will most likely work with both. Odds are it will. So that takes at least some of the burden away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I imagine that there's great competition in that space between not only the smartphone, smart speaker makers, but these companies. Like, obviously, I'm interested in Toyota, and they probably don't want to give a bunch of information over to this smart speaker, and you can start your car remotely, but they want you to use their app, and all manufacturers are going to be protective, I imagine, of their data in that regard.
Something that Google has always done before the smart speakers is they try and put the user first as much as they possibly can. And so it may sound somewhat naive, but I feel that if we just keep creating compelling experiences, people will come, and whatever needs to be there will ultimately be there because of that. And I personally, on a personal level, would rather allow consumer choice and people to win this out than any other way to do that.
What's it like with you guys in a room? I imagine it's like an SNL skit writing room, right? Where you're just storyboarding everywhere and your concepts of how humans are going to interact with this device. Have you come across stuff on your own, or do you get it from observing people in coffee shops? Or?
Right, we do a lot of observations. We do a lot of just asking people, oh, how do you do that? Or, you see somebody, and especially the home. This is actually the biggest challenge. Like, before I was working at Google Home, when I worked at Skype, I worked at other places, Motorola, I worked at a cell phone company for a long time. it was easier to really just ask people stuff because it was, again, back to that app sort of thing. You're just like, oh, what are you using on your phone or whatever the case may be. And the difference here is that we tend to want to know what people are doing in their home a little bit. And there's a barrier, you just don't, I guess I could knock on people's doors, but it really hasn't, I'm not really the type of person to do that. But as much as we can, we try and observe and try and use secondary research like Toll Brothers or whatever to understand what people are doing in the home. And a lot of our insight comes from observing, or also people tell us too. We have helplines, and it's amazing what comes into that helplines. But I would say 95% of the features as we build this out are coming from some sort of observation or some user somehow. And so yeah, we do that a lot. But we also spend a lot of time taking all that observation and trying to draw connections or insights with them, which sounds easy but is actually really difficult. And so that's a real group, that's a group thing. Yeah. Like I can read a bunch of stuff and then I can come to a conclusion, but usually we're coming together in a room to say, it looks like people do this, and everybody else is like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then you're kind of forced to defend that or bring that in. And so we do a ton of that. And yeah, storyboarding, we're always storyboarding. Acting, I used to act things out a lot. I used to just film, just me and somebody else. We used to film ourselves and then throw it in After Effects and put voiceovers over it and stuff like that. But anything to get up and moving and get the human in the environment is what we really try and look at.
Let me ask you about digital marketing. It's one of my favorite subjects.
No problem.
And this is an exciting opportunity, I think, for digital marketers. It's probably the new frontier. Yeah. And I'm wondering about I guess you have to ask the question, just blatantly, what does Google collect? Google, we know, obviously, our search history. Google knows everything. God bless them. I love it. It's very helpful to digital marketers as well. They know what we're interested in, what shoes we've looked at recently, what websites, that we can present ads for. Is there a connection currently to the requests that we make audibly on these home speakers?
Absolutely not. Right now, we're really focused on trying to bring value to the user. And so the only data that we collect using the Google speakers, we anonymize immediately. And so we have no connection to any individual. If we know, say, for example, if 500 people requested Arcade Fire yesterday, we do know that, but we don't know who. It's all been scrubbed and washed. And we don't make that connection into marketing just yet, again, because we're trying to build something that's meaningful to the user first. Gotcha. And that's, I think, our biggest challenge right now.
The new frontier for businesses have to prepare for this, though, right? Yeah. So I wonder, can you tell us what businesses are going to need to do with their websites? Do we have to get dialogue ready to take these requests from speakers? Or
we will. I think probably the biggest concern in terms of marketing for Google is to make sure that businesses don't have to work too hard to make this stuff ready. And so we were talking backstage, and what was announced at Google has a conference every year, the I/O. It's an annual conference, and they debuted some potentially game-changing technology where the last mile to small businesses is not on them to get that information out there, but actually on us. And so they've created now dialogues and ways to interact via the phone with people at, say, small restaurants.
And they can't tell the difference.
And then, and these people don't really know the difference, and then you can bring that information back to you. So those are kind of the things. The idea is not to make, the idea is to bring the information of the world to everyone at their fingertips. And that's our mission statement. And that we take that seriously in the sense that it's like your finger. It's not like bring the information to the world if you do all this work and then somebody else does all this work. It's like this should be here for you. And so we're always trying to innovate on that end.
It's a magical opportunity, I think, because if I could be spared indignities of having to call and make reservations, I'd just have a robot do it. Party of 6. I don't know how that works, but maybe it's like Westworld or something. How close are we to Westworld?
I can't say a thing.
Have to get them drunk afterwards.
But can you?
We're still trying to figure it out in our household, and we all have our different ways that we use it. You know, obviously when this technology first came out, everyone was trying to change the lights or change the temperature or you know, ask Google to wake me up in the morning. But you know, I feel like there's a next wave of smart products that are going to get a lot more convenient, you know, for our lifestyle. Like practically tell me when my teenager comes home, wake me up.
I would like to see that. I think the most humbling thing about working on Google Home is the potential for people to express themselves and express their lifestyle and the way they want to live their life, and that this tool can be something that really aids that. Right. And I think to really to be a support for that. And to really get there, that's kind of why I was talking about like context and humans and stuff like that, is because we need the community of everyone to start thinking about this and think exactly what you were just saying. Like, oh yeah, you know, what I need is like a teenager checker or whatever the case may be. And not that it just comes from Google, but that somebody—
Smart toilet too.
Yeah, exactly. Smart toilet, self-cleaning, whatever it may be. But that we need everyone to start participating in making those things and then bringing those out to be taken advantage of by everybody. And this becomes more the platform than necessarily, oh, let's just wait for Google to make the smart toilet or whatever.
I'm rooting for you because my whole family has screen addiction. And you know, we all sit around and don't talk and look at our devices. And if you could somehow get us off that, that's your challenge.
Yeah, that's our most exciting challenge, actually. We were working a lot at I/O. Again, there were Android and other parts of Google announced a number of digital well-being things to keep screen time off, and we are obviously naturally right in the middle of that. And so you'll be seeing some pretty interesting things.
We look forward to seeing what you come up with, Charles. We're out of time, but thank you very much. Let's hear it for Charles Berg.
Thank you.